Welcome back to Digital Trends Live. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. It is Friday, which means it's time for another edition of Tech Briefs, where myself, Greg Nibbler, am joined by Ken Yeung from Flipboard. Hello, Ken.
Hey, Greg. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you as well. As usual, a lot to talk about. Let's get it started off with this, though. I guess the biggest news that's happening right now has been over the last 24 hours, and that has to do with all of these conventions getting canceled by the coronavirus, the threat of the coronavirus. Just in the last 24 hours or so, we've had F8 canceled. Microsoft has pulled out of the Game Developers Conference, as well as Sony, as well as a number of other ones. Actually, it's happening so rapidly, it's hard to even keep up with them all. You have the Geneva Auto Show, which was just canceled. And that, usually the attendance is about 600,000 people for that. And now Switzerland has banned any gatherings over 1,000 people at any one particular spot, so that's canceled. There are so many things happening with this. What's your reaction to this? What other ones have you seen? Like, how do you think this is going to affect the tech industry?
So it's certainly having, coronavirus is certainly having a big impact around the world, and it's not just with tech, but just business in general. If you look at the earnings that were just happened, earnings reports that just happened today, this week, a lot of companies have said that they're going to be missing this quarter's guidance, and that includes Microsoft and Apple. Already, Facebook's F8 Developer Conference has been canceled, and that's not until May. The Game Developers Conference, which is actually coming up soon, has also started to see a lot of people pull out, a lot of companies pull out, including just today, Amazon. Microsoft has also pulled out from that. Sony, Unity has also withdrawn. So all of these are citing coronavirus concerns. And so South by Southwest, which is actually in a couple of weeks, says that they're closely monitoring the situation. And, so there's certainly not a shortage of these conferences that are basically erring on the side of caution. As we talked about probably a couple of weeks ago with Mobile World Congress, MWC, that actually got scrapped because of coronavirus concerns. What they say is coronavirus concerns. But of course, that hasn't really stopped people from really showing up. There have been companies that have held events there. But I wouldn't be surprised as we move forward through 2020 to see more of these events start to err on the side of caution and safety, and say, look, we're not going to have a bunch of thousands of people converge on a single place and run the risk of infection.
Right.
So Google I/O is monitoring the situation. I can imagine the same thing for Amazon's conferences, for Microsoft, for Apple. WWDC is also coming down the road. IFA down in Berlin in September. So a lot of these other, big name events will probably have to rethink things, and whether or not everything starts to turn into an online conference versus an in-person one, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be a trend. You're going to see more live streamed events. You're going to see more like closed off things where maybe just a few members of the media show up. One of the big issues with a lot of this is, these conventions are where people get hands-on time with some of these products, and they actually, especially reviewers, sites like ours, where people can actually see what's going on, and that's all not going to be happening because of that. Clearly, minor in the grand scheme of when it comes to the coronavirus, but definitely an important factor when it comes to tech. So, along those lines, I guess let's go back to talk about MWC, because that was canceled already, but all of those companies still had to make their unveilings and showcase their products, and that is what we've seen right now. So kind of transitioning into that, we've seen a bunch of announcements from some smartphone manufacturers. Huawei making some big moves, actually. One of the things they did, they have some new devices that don't use Google Apps, which obviously that's a big concern. Now, it's not going forward with their full new platform, their new OS that they were creating. Harmony, I think is what it's called. Yeah, Harmony's not, that's not quite ready yet. So it's still on Android, but definitely a big move by them. But I think the biggest thing this week having to do with them is their foldable phone and some of the great reviews they've been getting with it by the people who have been able to get some hands-on with it. I think it's the Mate XS is what it is. And this finally seems to be, at least according to what we've been seeing, one of the foldables that seems to get it right.
So, but haven't we heard that story before when it comes to foldables? I think there were some reviews, some initial thoughts as saying, look, the Samsung Z Flip was pretty good, and same thing for, to a certain degree, the Motorola Razr. But I think at the end of the day, what has confounded people is the screen, right? And sure, the form factor it's like, oh, it looks amazing, or if it works well. But if the display itself doesn't really function, like doesn't last that long, I mean, is it really worth spending thousands of dollars on this? And
Well,
the Mate XS has a lot of things going against it. I mean, I believe it's pretty pricey first off the bat, and I mean, and you don't have the Google apps on there, so is it really worth buying, even if you're in Europe or anything like that? I mean, I would imagine that that's what people would want to have. I mean, have Gmail and Google Maps and those type of things available on there. And of course, Google has said, look, don't, if you have a Huawei device, do not sideload our apps on there, and because it might be a security risk. You never know if you're getting with a source where you're downloading the Google app is actually a legitimate source. So
right.
you could run the risk of really causing more damage to your data and to your privacy.
And that part is definitely a concern. And you're right. It's when it comes to these foldables, all of them are too expensive in my mind. So you would definitely the price wise, yeah. I think this one's probably somewhere around $3,000 US, I think, something like that. So
it's more expensive than the first Galaxy Fold,
right?
Yeah, Samsung's moving in the opposite direction.
Price-wise, there's no way. But as far as the screen, and definitely there's issues with Motorola's, there's issues with the Z Flip. I mean, it still has the crease in it. They even have to put like a little warning, like, oh yeah, no, that crease is supposed to be there. But this doesn't appear to have that. So I guess like on the technical end of things, it does look pretty cool. So maybe they've got something figured out there, but we'll have to see. Continuing on there, because I know we have to get to some other topics here, but they also debuted the Mate Pad Pro, which is an iPad competitor. We'll have to see if that takes off. I think that's a difficult one to go up against, but at least they're trying. Certainly a big manufacturer. But I think the other trend from all these manufacturers is 5G, 5G, 5G. All these phones, Sony's, LG's, Honors, Huawei's, everybody who's bringing them out, they all have that 5G trend. So I think that's a really, really big thing that we're going to see.
But they didn't actually announce it in Barcelona at whatever still event they had it in for MWC. They like Sony and LG. They're like, hey, here you go. We made an announcement without any fanfare. But you're right, like 5G is there. Whether or not it's actually going to be the same type of 5G, I believe it's like Sony is, they have 5G, but it's not the millimeter wave 5G on there. So there's different levels of 5G that you get with each phone. So not all phones are going to be the same when it comes to 5G. So that's something for consumers to be aware of.
Well, for sure. Yeah, different kinds. But definitely, I think the 5G trend as far as the phones themselves being 5G enabled in some way. And then, you got to get into where it's even available, too. That's the whole issue. All right, we got time for one more quick one really quick. And this is just kind of an update to a story that we've talked about before. It has to do with Clearview AI. If you don't know what that is, it's actually a company who essentially scraped the data of personal data, photos, all kinds of things off of social media sites and other places, and then compiled it all into one giant database. So basically, they got an online profile of you from all of the public data that we post. We all know we post a lot online. They went and took that and then compiled an image of you and made it into a searchable database. And then that database was sold, this service was sold to hundreds, if not thousands of different organizations. And we know that there was some law enforcement involved. The New York Police Department, I believe, was one of them that actually purchased this service and was utilizing it. So they used facial recognition, then searched for somebody. And then what happened is they got hacked. So their actual accounts, their user base, the list of who that is got hacked, and now it's starting to be released publicly, and we're finding out a lot more about who is using this service.
Sure, and look, I think at the very beginning, Clearview was saying, look, we're being used by hundreds of law enforcement agencies, and for facial recognition. Now, I think people are kind of concerned. It's like, look, okay, that's fine. I mean, it's on one hand, it's like my information is out there, it's public, but I don't actually give you permission to use it in your facial recognition. And some state governments, some city and state governments have banned use of law enforcement to saying you can't use facial recognition at all. But yeah, you're right. The Clearview got hacked, or they had some sort of unauthorized access, as was the typical term that people use these days. And as a result, their customer list got released. And not only do we have law enforcement, we have DOJ, Department of Justice, we have ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. We have even businesses such as Macy's. We have wealth funds. We have Walmart is using it as well, and a bunch of other private entities. And there's also been reports that Clearview has been selling their technology and their capabilities to authoritarian regimes as well. And so there's a lot of complexity, like in terms of like, is this actually kosher or not? Like, should they be doing that?
Right.
Now, Clearview's AI's founder in a interview with I believe with 60 Minutes said, look, this is the First Amendment right that they have to scrape all this stuff. So, I mean, that's up for debate. But there's a lot of these companies that are using this for various reasons, whether it's to have but there's a lot of risk to potentially expose victims of child abuse, to find illegal immigrants, to find dissidents, or find criminals, find terrorists. I mean, there's a lot of these, it's an ongoing debate to be dependent on whether, what's going to happen, whether you're actually going to find is it actually going to be used for benevolent purposes. But
right.
I mean, the risk outweigh the rewards.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And that's the thing, when it comes down to that personal data out there and having anybody just be able to buy access to it is what's kind of weird. And as we see more of the names come out, I mean, it's definitely a lot of ramifications and a lot of, I think, some new laws that could come from this as well as far as protecting data. But we're out of time. Ken, as always, thank you so much. Here's another edition of Tech Briefs.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it.